Hey there folks, today I'm going to go over the Humminbird Helix 5 versus the Humminbird Helix 7. Now this might seem like a no-brainer decision that is just dictated by the screen size, but there are actually other considerations to make when deciding between these two models. That might include what kind of software you're looking at, if you have any networking requirements, if you're looking at minimizing how much battery you need to power these things. This is something especially true for ice and kayak anglers. And then also looking at overall desires in terms of trying to minimize weight if weight is a concern for you. So I'm going to go over those briefly in this video to help you decide between which model is right for you. Now, right off the bat, one of the things I did not mention was price, and that is looking at comparing the non-networkable models between these two. You're going to be somewhere between $300 and $500 depending on what type of features you want in your Helix 5 versus $500 to $700 if you get a non-networkable Helix 7 depending on the features. So you're essentially paying about $200 more for that 2 inches more of screen size. Now, if you want to be able to network your fish finder, you cannot do that with the Helix 5 series. None of those have the ability to network, so Bluetooth or connect to your iPilot Link if you have an iPilot Link capable trolling motor. So you'll have to be looking at the Helix 7 if you're going to do that, and then you start looking at upwards of $700 to $900 if you're looking at a networkable Helix 7. So that's something to look at right off the bat. If you need something that you need to be able to link in through Bluetooth into your systems or to your trolling motor, then you're going to have to be looking at the Helix 7. Otherwise, the software running on these is basically the same. You're not going to see any significant differences if you're an ice angler between the Helix 5 and Helix 7 models, especially if you have your Fishfinders updated to the latest software, and I have a video that shows you how to do that. I'll put a card above and a link at the end of this video. Otherwise, they're going to look the same. It doesn't matter if you're on open water or ice fishing. Additionally, with these models, you'll find even in the Helix 5 or 7s, you can get down imaging, side imaging, you'll have your chirp sonar and GPS chart plotter mapping. You can get models that feature all of those. It just goes up incrementally in cost. Starting with the base model of about $300 with just chirp and GPS, chirp sonar on the 5, and then working its way upward to the SI side imaging, which is going to be closer to $500. Similarly, you're going to start at that base, about $500 on the 7, working your way up to $700. And then once you get into the networkable ones, it goes even further up from there. Okay, another thing to consider when trying to decide between these two is if you're a kayak angler or you're an ice fisherman, then you are relying on a battery to power your fish finders when you're out there. And you might be using a sealed lead acid battery, about this size. This is a 7 amp hour battery there. Or you might be using lithium iron batteries, iron phosphate batteries, which are a little bit lighter and can pack a little bit more amps into the battery. But the main thing I want to talk about here is that the 5 will on average draw about half of an amp per hour versus 0.8 amps per hour with the 7. That's just because of that larger screen has higher power demands. Obviously, these are just averages. You can draw a little more power depending on how you're using the screen, how bright you have it, and whatnot. But my point is that the vast majority of these small batteries that are designed to fit in ice fishing shuttles, like these ones here, they have a specific slot that fits just this size of battery right here. You're going to be limited on how much power you can have. If you're in a kayak, you might be able to take a larger battery with you and thus maybe able to alleviate some of these issues. But the main thing I want you to take away is that, with a 7 amp hour battery, the Helix 5 is going to run, a day and a half, maybe 2 days out on the ice or on the water without needing a recharge, whereas you're going to blow through that battery in a single day on the Helix 7. So one thing to consider is the Helix 5 is going to be far more battery efficient even with a heavy, cheap, inexpensive 7 amp hour sealed lead acid battery, you're gonna get a full day on the water or ice, no problem. If you upgrade to something a little bit lighter with higher amp hours like this lithium battery, then you're gonna be able to spend 2 full days out on the water without needing to recharge. Whereas this 7 will blow through this battery, this 7 amp hour sealed lead acid battery, in a day. I might get a day and some change on the 10 amp hour. So, you know, when I'm in my kayak, I have to carry a 12, 16, 24 amp hour battery to power this for more than a day. And if I'm on long road trips, I have to be able to recharge, or I have to carry spare batteries. Less of a concern with the 5-inch. And that ties into my next discussion, which ties in around weight. Now, weight's usually not that big of a concern for powerboat anglers, and a lesser concern for kayak anglers, although if you're carting your kayak a long distance, it might matter. But for ice anglers, it's a big deal, especially if you're somebody who hole hops a lot like I do, and I don't want to carry a sled out there with me that day. I'm just running and gunning. Then, you know, the size and weight of the fish finder actually does kind of play into it. And the head weight of the Humminbird Helix 5 is about 1.5 pounds. It's closer to 3 pounds on the Helix 7, so it's quite a bit heftier. Then you take into consideration that you're gonna have to carry perhaps heftier batteries to power this 7 for the full day out on the ice, or make that additional investment in a lighter lithium battery. You know, you're looking at 10 pounds with a sealed lead acid battery and a shuttle, which starts to get kind of heavy when you're hoofing it across the ice and in the snow. It's much lighter with the Helix 5. You know, I can put a lithium battery in there. I can go out there and keep this whole thing with the shuttle under 5 or 6 pounds, which makes it really easy to carry across the ice and run and gun. Finally, I mean, obviously screen size is a consideration. If you're somebody who has poor vision or wants to be able to run split screen and just has that additional space, I can run the split screen on the 5 and I feel like it's fine on my kayaks and when I'm ice fishing. But the 7, it's nice to be able to have that additional split screen, and especially for side imaging, it really makes a big difference. Now remember, especially when it comes to side imaging, on the Helix 7s, you can get mega imaging, which is basically, it's a 1.2 megahertz imaging. Absolutely amazing at making the structure on the bottom much more clearer, especially on side imaging. You can really pick out structure. It's really a night and day difference. But it doesn't really help you actually identify fish on the imaging. You still have to switch to a different lower kilohertz in order to do that. But you can do side imaging on both, but just realize that if you want the mega down imaging or mega side imaging, you're gonna have to go with that Helix 7 size. They just do not offer it in the 5 at this point. But like I said, screen size might be a consideration for some, especially if you're a kayak angler that's going to push your fish finder away from the chair. It's going to be farther away from you. You need to be able to see it from a distance. I know some kayak anglers that are running it, you know, forward of their pedals, or if they're a paddle kayak angler, they can't have the fish finder close or tight to them. Because I'm running pedal drives and motor drive kayaks, I can run these both really tight to me, and I actually generally prefer using the 5. It's just lighter on the kayak. It takes up less space. It's just less power demand on my batteries, and it meets my needs overall. Do I love having that mega down imaging? Absolutely, especially when I'm structure fishing for spiny rays like bass and walleye and perch and things like that. But overall, 9 times out of 10, I still find myself reaching for the 5, especially during ice fishing season, just because I don't like dragging stuff across the ice. The less weight I have out there, the better. So it's all going to be a personal preference, but something to consider is to look at the weight, look at the cost, look at the size of the screens. Does it fit your needs? Battery consumption. Those are all things you should be considering when making this decision. Either way, they're both awesome units to use, whether you're fishing on open water or hard water. And I hope this video helped address some of those questions you might have. All right, I'll put links to all of these below. Fish finders are really tough to come by right now because of COVID. So if you can find one, snatch them up. They're generally unavailable on Hummingbird's website, but they have them at various retailers. I'll see you next time. out on the water or out on the ice or right here in my backyard. And just remember, fish smarter, not harder. Bye guys.